if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we spent Ikar Demar Kamshi Center on Shana. We thought you were going to talk about Shana, but if you want to do both,
No. I'll talk about predominantly. It'll be about Shana. I'm saying in general. I think the Olam was holding by Achil and Shana this week.
We're just starting. We took a little bit of a break for 2 days to go into Dal Minim, whatever. Kitzer, whatever you want to teach us, we're here to hear. So,
Zusammen, Bez Hashem. So the sugya of sleeping in a sukkah, it is a very, very geschmack sugya. That's an understatement. And it's also a very surprising sugya. It's a very surprising sugya. The things that we're going to learn today, that might surprise us a little bit. For example, I would say the first surprise is a good trivia question. Where does it say, at least even in the Mishnayos in Masechta Sukkah, somewhere, where does it say that you're mechuyev to sleep in the sukkah? Maybe we could go home early. Maybe it doesn't say anywhere that you're mechuyev to sleep in the sukkah. It says oichlin, shoisin, even metayel in the sukkah. But it doesn't seem to talk about sleeping in the sukkah. It doesn't seem to have any Mishnah Mefereshes that requires you to sleep in the sukkah. Yeah, and the Taka Bemis, that's what it says in the Gemara in Sukkah, and Daf Kav Chesed Beis, that you make a sukkah, and you should make the sukkah your kfiyas, or in these 7 days, you make sure that the sukkah is a kfiyas, oichel, shoyse, metayel, no mention of sleep. Mitzad Sheni, there are many Mishnayos that are always discussing the aspects of sukkahs. Excuse me one moment. And when this Gemara discusses, when the Mishnayos discuss the halachas of sukkahs, it always says them in reference to sleeping. For example, on Daf Yud, on Daf Yud Dalet, it talks about, even later on, a yoshin tachas ha-mita. It's always talking about sleeping in the sukkah. When it talks about the Shulchan Aruch that talks about Tafresh Lamed Beis, Schach Pasel, it always is a reference to the yoshin under Schach Pasel. What's the din if you're sleeping under the Pasel part, the not Pasel part? All the Mishnayos that discuss the various halachas of sukkah always discuss them in regard to sleeping. In other words, it doesn't say ha'oichel tachas Schach Pasel. It'll talk about ha'yoshan tachas Schach Pasel. And when it discusses the halachas of a child, when a child is chayiv or pater, it discusses it in regard to a katan, atzarech li'imai. It's a reference to when the child is able to sleep in the sukkah. So we don't have a Mefurish Mishnah that says that a person is chayiv to sleep in the sukkah, oichel shoyse ve'yoshin b'sukkah, but you can't move a daf in Masechta Sukkah without there being a reference to somebody sleeping in the sukkah. And every halacha is always referred to klape its relationship to sleeping. And that kedekach, it seems to always warn us about in a remez to sleeping in the sukkah. And the Kaf HaChaim, he has an interesting idea. He says, why is it that it talks about sleeping tachas amita? He says it couldn't talk about achila tachas demita because you can't eat under a bed. But that only answers up one of the many Mishnayos and Gemaras that are all over Masechta Sukkah, that all the halachas are always referred to klape sleeping in the sukkah, which is also a little bit of a mystery. So why is it when the Mishnah in Kav Ches, the famous Mishnah, that's our sugya, discusses oichel shoyse, it should say, in all these 7 days, you make the sukkah the keva, and therefore you should sleep there, you should eat there, you should drink there. Why does it leave out sleeping? But akapanim, there's no shaila that sleeping is not only a chiyuv in the sukkah, but Rashi and Daf Chafam Beis says ikar yeshiva of the sukkah is sheina, achila, and shtia. It's the ikar yeshiva, it's a sukkah. And if you look at the Bikur Yankiv and Tafresh Lamed Beis, he says it even stronger. The Bikur Yankiv, the Archelaner, he says that the ikar of the mitzvah is sleeping. The Gemara in Daf Chavav explains this. The Gemara in Daf Chavav says we know that achila sarai, a person wants to drink, a person wants to have shahakals, adamas, whatnot. He's allowed to have them, even certain mezainis, he's allowed to have outside. But sleeping, says the Gemara in Sukkah, even sleeping arai outside the Sukkah is already going to be aser. So therefore, the ikar of the Sukkah is sleeping. Sleeping, anything that you do out, any sleeping cannot be done outside of the Sukkah, even a sheina sarai. Because it's ein kevel shena. We'll see soon maybe what the lumdis is. Even a little bit of sleep that rejuvenates, says the Gemara. And then Tav Reish Lamed Tes and Sif Beis, which that's our Sif. It added on to what the Mishnah left out, that he's supposed to sleep there. And Ein Yeshenim Chutz LaSukkah goes right to sleeping. Don't sleep outside the sukkah. Afilo Shnas Arai. Mashen Kein Mutar Lecha L'Achilas Arai Chutz LaSukkah. The Kama Achilas Arai, a person can have a cookie outside the sukkah, but he can't have a snack, a nap. He can have a snack, but he can't have a nap outside the sukkah. And therefore, the ikr of the sukkah is the sleeping in the sukkah. And that's really what it says in the Torah in Tav Reish Lamed Tes. He says, even for a minute, there is a Pri Megadim that's a bit mistopic. The Pri Megadim is mistopic that when it comes to tefillin, we know that you're not allowed to sleep in tefillin. Mitzad Sheni, there's a nidim by tefillin that the problem of tefillin is Shema Yafiach. He might come to pass gas. And therefore, there is a tzad that maybe it's only a problem, a shenas arai. But Mashain Kain, if it's under arai, so that's 54 seconds. There's a tzad that by tefillin, that's allowed. So the Pri Megadim is mistopic. That's all true by tefillin. What about by sukkah? Are you allowed even to sleep under 54 seconds under arai? Under arai. Are you allowed to sleep under arai outside of a sukkah? I saw the B'kur Yaakov, he answers this. He says that over here, the Inyan is Shema Yafiach, so 54 seconds, we don't have to worry. But over here, we have to worry. Why? Because here, even the little bit, maybe that 54 seconds is all we needed to go weiter. By sukkah, there's two reasons why a person says the Gemara in sukkah can't sleep outside the sukkah. Number one, even a short sleep. He might get carried away and it might last. Okay? The other reason is because even a little bit is all he needs. All he needs a little bit is just to rejuvenate him, to refresh himself. So therefore, the B'kur Yaakov says, even under 54 seconds, you can't sleep outside the sukkah. So there's no question that the ikr mitzvah seems to be sleeping in a sukkah. And the Mishnah says, Yoshin Tachas Amita, it says unbelievable words. I'm not a baki in anything, but I'm not a baki in Shas, in Sukkah. But to my knowledge, the only place in Gantz Masech the Sukkah where it says the words La Yotze Yidei Chavasai in a reference to a Sukkah is Lagabe Shena. It says a Yoshin Tachas Amita is La Yotze Yidei Chavasai. In Gantz Masech the Sukkah, it never says that Lashon. And Zayimar Darsheni. By a shofar it says that Lashon. By a lulav it says that Lashon. But the Lashon is not found by a Sukkah. So what's the pshat? It seems to be not only is sleeping an integral part of the mitzvah, maybe the ikr part of the mitzvah, like the B'kur Yaakov says, but so much so that if you slept under a bed, lo yotze yedei chayvasai. So I saw over here Davar Nifla from the Melech HaShleima. I think the Melech HaShleima, if I'm not mistaken, is the Talmud of the Shittim Kubetzes. Arizal, the Melech HaShleima on the Mishnayos, on this Mishnah, he explains that there's no chiyuv to eat in the sukkah. Okay, maybe the first night, okay, there's a first night, there's a Gzera Shavav, Tesvav, but there's no chiyuv to eat. And be'emes, a person technically, the entire sukkahs, he could have potatoes, he could have drinks, he could have a coffee, and he could have it outside the sukkah. And he could spend 7 straight days and never eat in the sukkah. Okay, the first night is a separate topic. Maybe we'll talk about it under Himmel. He could have vegetables and fruits. But Masha'ein Kain says the Melech HaShleima, when it comes to sleeping, there's no way that anybody could batter himself from not sleeping in the sukkah, because you can't go 3 days without sleeping. What does the famous Gemara say? That a person that makes a neder, Shvuah, is going to go 3 days without sleeping. We shmeiss him immediately, because that's a neder of that's a Shvuah shav. You obviously are not going to be able to not sleep for 3 days. So Mameli, you see that it's impossible to go an entire sukkah without sleeping in the sukkah. But it's possible to go to the sukkah without eating in the sukkah. He'll just have potatoes, he'll have apples. Mameli says the Melech HaShleima, Gevaldik Azach. That's why the Mishnah, Taka chapt on to Ayosh and Taka Samita, is La Yotze Yedei Chayvasai. Because then you're not possible to be Mekayim Yechiv, because it's impossible that a person should go 7 days without sleeping. So therefore, Dafka, the Mishnah chapt on by sleeping, because by eating, technically, you can get out of it. And Ad Kedei Kach, I saw a different Davar Nifla and Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Parallel on the Geis in the Rasag. He brings down the famous Balmor. Very famous. The Balmor says that why is it that by matzah we don't make a bracha on all 7 days of matzah? Masha'ein Kain, when it comes to a sukkah, we do. What's the difference? By sukkah, we all 7 days we make brachas. And Masha'ein by matzah not. So he explains, because technically, even if there's a mitzvah of matzah, the Goyin holds there's a mitzvah kiyumis of matzah, even if there's a mitzvah to eat matzah all 7 days, but technically there's no chiyuvis. You can go all 7 days and not have any matzah. You can have potatoes and potatoes and potatoes and potatoes. But Masha'ain came when it comes to sukkah. Could you go 7 days without going into the sukkah? Absolutely not. Why? You can have the same potatoes and potatoes and potatoes, right? But you certainly can't have a sukkah-less experience, a sleepless experience, because you have to sleep. It's within 3 days. You're for sure going to have to sleep. The Mela, everybody's going to have to sleep in the sukkah. Says the Bamor, therefore, they shtel the veka bracha. Since no matter what, there's no way to get out of the sukkah, the meshech, 1 of the days, 3 of the days of the yontif, because you're certainly going to need to sleep. So therefore, they made a bracha on sukkah. Hagam, there's no bracha on matzah. Now, this is obviously intriguing because we don't even make a bracha on sukkah of sleeping, which Mitzvah Hashem we'll have to talk about in Andramel when we talk about Leishif. But that's either, maybe the Balmor argues, number one, maybe he holds that you're talking make a bracha on sleeping, or it's because you're patterned with the eating. And ad kedei kach, there's people, myself included, that try whenever they go to sleep, to try to patter up the sleeping. And not even to be saying on that, which you made a bracha earlier, but to try to patter the sleeping and to have something to eat. Nishkefer looks to S and a bissel mer on Sukkos. But upon him, derech agav, you see from over here, davar nifla. You see over and over again that the ikar mitzvah of sukkah is the shena. The ikar mitzvah of sukkah is sleeping dafka. And that's why, number one, it's layatzi dechabatzai. And that's why taka they made a dafka bracha on the sukkah, whereas by matzah they didn't make a bracha. And that's why Gevaldik, the Mishnayos always refer to any of the halachas of the psulim. If you're sleeping under daled amas of patzel and daled tvachim and patzel, they always talk about sleeping and not eating, because by eating, technically a person can get out of it, but by sleeping, you can never get out of it. The male of the ikar mitzvah sukkah is dafka, the sleeping, and that's why it's davar nifla. The Mishnah says the munkacher. The munkacher is in Beis Memvav in the Minchas Elazar. He says that's why we find that in the Mishnah of Kavches, it could not possibly say all 7 days, oichel, v'shoisa, and you make your sukkah keva. Why? Zok the Munkatcher. Because if it would have said oichel, v'shoisa, and shena, you make your sukkah keva, there would be a mashmoyis that even the only time that you have to sleep in the sukkah is if it's a shenas keva. But we know not like that. We know we always have to sleep in the sukkah, even a shenas harai. Even a shenas harai. And since you have to sleep even a shenas harai, it didn't want to say kol zayin yomim oichel v'shoisa bekeva. Shenk in your house is a harai. You eat, because rather you can eat an harai in your house, but you can't have sleeping in your house harai. Okay? Why? If it's the ikar mitzvah, shein is the ikar mitzvah. Why no bracha? So that we spoke about, and we'll speak about again. That has to do with the fact that perhaps they shtelted a vek on the ikar kfiyas of a person. Maybe eating is the ikar kfiyas of a person. Maybe this has a lot to do with the shilos of Chanukah, where a person should light in the place where he eats, in the place where he sleeps. But that's an andre shmuz. And ad kedei kach, now, things a lot more move on. The shear, for example, is a person of a shaila, is a katan chayiv in sleeping, a katan who's a bar chinuch, is he chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah? So that's no less than the Gemara mefurish in sukkah. That's no less that the Mishnah said, the Gemara says mefurish, that a child that doesn't call out ima in the middle of the night, I guess every child calls out ima, I guess we still call out mama. But Mashain Kain, a child that's holding still by saying ima needs his mother, so then maybe he has a p'tur of sukkah. But a regular child, a child of age, that he's not holding by saying mama, he has a chiyuv to sleep in sukkah. Why not? It's a mitzvah of chinuch, like all of the mitzvahs. Okay, the HaShulchan brings down in Tafresh Memsi base that if it's cold, the child is more susceptible to cold, and avada he's going to want to sleep in the sukkah, so you have to be on top of it. If he's able to, he's not able to. But the idea is clear. It's a mitzvah. Like any other, not like any other mitzvah, more than any other mitzvah. It's a mitzvah deraisa to sleep in the sukkah, and everybody's chayiv in that. Every man is chayiv in that mitzvah. So the Maisa, with this nidin, now let's try to go a little bit and try to figure out. There's a lot that we have to figure out. I think the first thing we have to try to figure out is why is it that there's a lot of people in Chutz La'aretz that don't sleep in the sukkah. I say in Chutz La'aretz because in Eretz Yisrael, it is clearly the prevalent and common minig that everybody sleeps in the sukkah. It's not a wide-standing minig that people don't sleep in the sukkah, which we know in Chutz La'aretz does exist, and we know that the Ramah went out of his way to be Melamed Zchus, so we have to also go in the derech of the Ramah to be Melamed Zchus. But you have to know that if my children, Lamashal, were listening to this year, they wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. They would say, "What? There's people that don't sleep in the sukkah?" They would be shocked. Who doesn't sleep in the sukkah? Women maybe don't sleep in the sukkah, which we'll see in a minute. That has to do with the Ramah. But in Chutz La'aretz, all the years, there's clearly a long-standing minig. And this minig, you'll read Shulchan Aruch, and you're not going to find it in the Sefer Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, Oichlem v'yeshenim chutz l'sukkah. I guess the Shulchan Aruch was from Tzvas. I guess he slept in the sukkah. Come to gain the Ramah, and he says, well, no, again today, we see Lahakel Achshav, there's people that they don't sleep in the sukkah. And we find only the Medaktikin are sleeping in the sukkah. So he says, Yesh oimrim mishum tzina, says the Heilige Ramah, that maybe it's because of the cold and the tsar to sleep in cold places. And he's quoting a Mordechai. Let's elaborate for a moment about this. This is something that can hear all the way back from the time of the Mordechai. You're going back 1,000 years. And it seems to be that there was a somewhat of a long-standing minig that people did not sleep in the sukkah. And the Be'emes Omer Darsheni. What's the pshat? So there's clearly a p'tur of mitztayer. And as a matter of fact, I'll tell you something interesting, that the p'tur of mitztayer was said by sleeping. Rava Omar mitztayer pater min sukkah was a discussion about sleeping. So clearly there is a p'tur of mitztayer when it comes to sleeping in a sukkah. Ad kedei kach, there are rishonim that hold that the p'tur of mitztayer is only by sleeping and not by eating, because by eating it can help sukkah. The whole thing takes very short. So for eating, it's a short amount of time. Metafunstrang a bissel. Work hard, big deal. When it comes to sleeping, a person's freezing cold, he's boiling hot, whatever it is, there's noise. So there clearly is a p'tur of mitztayer, pater min sukkah. But it's not so simple to claim the mitztayer p'tur. Mitzvah Hashem, we're gonna have to learn the sukkah of mitztayer. But al kapanim, the Torah does say that Adarabba, the chiyuv of sleeping is even more chamer than a chiyuv. So the Ramah, the Darkei Moshe quotes a Mordechai, and he says, look, people are chayla, and therefore, especially, in the cold Medinas that they lived in upper areas of Germany and France and Poland and higher, I guess, I suppose, latitudes. And it seemed to be that it was freezing. The Torah says that his country wasn't so cold. The Ramah, after he quotes this in the Darkei Moshe, he says, look, it's not such a good reason, the Darkei Moshe says. He says, Maisa, the person can just get a blanket. And the truth is that maybe Taka Avada, he should certainly consider that. It's Yadua that when the Gra was in Tfisa, when the Gra was in jail, it was during Sukkot. And the guy didn't want to sleep outside the Sukkah. So the guy started to do laps, and he would run around. And the Maisa, finally they saw that by the guy there's no eitzah. The guy just would not fall asleep. He just wouldn't go to sleep. So finally they built the guy in a sukkah. But you see the way that people were meiser nefesh to sleep in the sukkah. To do a Ramosha Feinshin Zichron Levracha was meiser ad asayf to be sleeping in the sukkah. And maybe it comes from, he felt there was maybe a certain extra chayas. It's Yadua, Ramosha's father Zichron Levracha. It was a tremendous medaktik in mitzvahs. Ramosha's father slept in the sukkah, and he as a result of it, he got sick and he was nifter. I'm sure he wasn't mitztayer at the time, but Ramosha saw the Mesiras Nefesh. Avada person shouldn't even have a havamina of such a thing. But we see that there was clearly by the medaktikim a tremendous bikush for the diktuk of the mitzvah of sleeping in a sukkah, even when it was cold. To do the kapishnitza, Heschel. So he was very not well. He wasn't well. And his family were very nervous. He was going to be Moitzer Nafshe to sleep in the sukkah. So there's no braver. They went to Satmar Rebbe. They went to Paisik Adar. They went to Satmar Rebbe to tell him that he can't sleep in the sukkah. So Satmar Rebbe understood the responsibility and the Pekuach Nefesh. So Satmar Rebbe came to the house to be Mevaker Cholim of the Kapishnitza. And the second he walked in, the Kapishnitza said to him, Rebbe, Chbetaich, please, right? Anything, talk about anything. Don't talk about the sukkah, the tsar that I'm going to have if I can't sleep in the sukkah. Okay, so certainly that's a matter for tzaddikim, and if a person is mitztayer be'emes, or if he's a chayla, he certainly is pater min sukkah, and he's a hedjid if he'll sleep in the sukkah. But a person has to be very, very careful before he claims mitztayer pater min sukkah. It's a dua. that there's a Yisayid V'Shayrish Avodah. Not sure if I mentioned it last time. That the Rosh Hashanah brings, Yisayid V'Shayrish Avodah says that if you go out of the sukkah, even for a second, for no reason, so then you're mevatel mitzvah to say. And everyone's bothered. How could that be? Tejva getting the dura. It's not a jail cell. So Shlomo Zalman said, yeah, but what if you'd be offered thousands and millions of dollars for every second that you're staying in your house? So even if there's a problem in your house, you'd be very, very, very weary to leave. In other words, even if mitzvah is patur min sukkah, but a person makes a cheshbon when he lives in his house, is it kedai for him to live? I guess maybe you can make a cheshbon like this. Let's say I was in my store and the air conditioning went off of my store. So is it so simple that you would just close the store and go home? So before you say it's too hot in the sukkah, maybe you have to cheshbon that. The person has to be very, very, has to weigh with a heavy hand. If I'd be in my store and there was no air conditioning, would I just close the store and go home? The air conditioning is broken. So there's no air conditioning in your sukkah. You just go right home. Let's say it's cold in the store. You would put on another sweater. Tafun's trying to get a bissel. So the you have to be very careful. And even the Ramah is not thrilled of this limitzvah to say it's too cold. Kavachaymer, that like the Torah says, we don't live in the Medinas. Now, New York today, I don't think cold is the issue right now. Obviously, rain and all that is a different story. And the Vadich, but we're going to leave Mitzvah on the side, Mitzvah. And we'll talk about Mitzvah. But that's the first reason why there was a limit of people that didn't sleep in the sukkah in Chutz La'aretz, because it was very, very cold. The Ramah himself doesn't like this heter so much. Ramah brings his own heter. But you see over here, the Darkei Moshe, the Ramah, they bring down that Velinira, Mishum de Mitzvah Sukkah, Ishu Beisa, Ish V'Ishta, Kederach Shudar Kol Hashana. So the whole entire Teichva King to do is that I should have a family matziv. I'm being together with my wife in the sukkah. And Mamela, if he has a sukkah miyuchet for his wife and him, great. But if not, he can't make a sukkah miyuchet. So then he's pater. And then he says, Toiv lahachmir, it's better to try to be there with your wife. This is a big musar. He's try to build a sukkah that his wife could come to. So the Ramah leaves us with this idea that ba'atzim, it's not l'chatchila. The minig ha'olam of not sleeping in the sukkah seems to be not great. But the Heilig Ramah was malam mitzchus, and he said either it starts, it's akaris, it's freezing. If it's freezing, the Ramah says that it's in our Medinas, it's not as cold. Or says the Heilig Ramah, even if it's not as cold, but al kapanim ish v'ishta, he wants to sleep together with his wife, and he wants to have a family matziv, and that's not so possible a lot of times in a sukkah. The Torah Tumima, he says this idea also. He said that fakert, a woman has a mitzvah to be misayeh her husband in sleeping in the sukkah, and that she gets a siyua azah, like hey, ki yikach ishta isha, that she might also have like a misayeh hechsher mitzvah to help him in his mitzvah. The Mariel slept with his wife in the sukkah. He made a sukkah that he was able to sleep in the sukkah with his wife. There's some sefer, it's brought down that everybody came in, all the kids, grandchildren, everybody. The Kaf HaChaim says it's very good for their neshamas. And Akopanim, that's clear that if there is no sukkah, if a person has a sukkah miyuchedes for him and his wife, let's say he could build on a porch or something like that, so then you lost the limitzchus of the Heilig Ramah. And it's clear also that these heterim only apply to someone who's married, but they certainly don't apply to yeshiva bacher. Therefore, unless he's going to cry out Ima, it does not seem to be that if it's not so cold, it doesn't seem to be that there is a heter for someone to be sleeping outside the sukkah if he's not married. Now again, Ramah doesn't say like the way it's quoted. Some people say that Ramah says you're not mechuyev to sleep in a sukkah. That's incorrect. Ramah does not say that. Ramah says a limitzchus, that there's a limitzchus. If you could do it, a vada yuchayev, right? But the Zalnish Makatrik Zayin of Yid in Nevada, there is a limitzchus in the Heilig Ramah. Certainly is our teacher to be malamitzchus. But again, like I keep on saying, not to be so quick. The emes is that there's bichlal a big problem. If a person claims mitzdayer, it's Yadua, very famous in the Mordechai, that if a person is going to claim mitzdayer, let's say he says it's too cold for a sukkah. So let's say you built a sukkah in a way where you can't be makayim the sleeping in the sukkah. So there's a famous Mordechai, and the Ramah talks about in the next simon, that if a person can't be makayim the mitzvah, one of the aspects of sukkah, the sleeping in the sukkah, so then that sukkah doesn't have on it a shame sukkah, it might be puzzle for eating. It's not a sukkah. A sukkah is something that you could eat in and sleep in. Okay, so I guess you're going to have to say that mistama, since if Bamis it's freezing, or Bamis he must be in a sukkah with his wife, so then it's not possible to have sleeping in a sukkah, and therefore it's not a psul in the sukkah. But you realize, Rabbi Isai, it's a garnish pashit. The ganze Ramah is not pashit, Rabbi Isai. You could say that we don't have in the Haim Sadishkavinkin air conditioning, so therefore the Paiskim didn't talk about it, and the Gemara didn't talk about it. But they had women in the times of Chazal. How do I know? There's a Ksais that talks about the person that was married. So you see that women. So then how come no Gemara says that a person that he is pater from sleeping in a sukkah because he can't sleep in the sukkah with his wife? I'm saying, if he can make a sukkah just him and his wife, so then it's a Kedai investment, even the Ramah is saying that. But even the ganze Ramah is very schwer because it's not a new thing to have a wife. So how come this heter was only brought, 1,000 years after the Chasimus Hashas? So therefore,
so why in Eretz Yisrael don't the women sleep in the sukkah?
So the truth is that the Ramah is saying Eli Mitzchos. It's definitely not a kasha on somebody whose wife doesn't sleep in the sukkah. Mitzat Sheni, there are a lot of people here that go out of their way to make it that they could sleep in a sukkah with their wife.
Really?
100%. 100%. They try. Also, a person has to know there's other matzavim. A lady has a baby, for example. So you have to know, let's say you have a person has a baby, says wife needs his help, especially if she's within the first month, she's considered a chayla, and she needs somebody to help her, to give her the baby, to nurse the baby. So you might have a heter of chayla misham she'ar patam min sukkah. She's considered a chayla. So I'm saying there are other heterim that we might have what to talk about. But mitzad the etzim zach, it does seem to be that l'chatchila a person should certainly try to sleep in the sukkah.
What if you have an Eretz Yisrael, a sukkah downstairs in front of your 8th apartment building house? It's in the parking lot. The Viber are going to sleep in such a sukkah? There is such a Messias? You're telling me that every Avrei
is such a Messias, for sure. 100%. I'm not saying everyone, no, because again, the lady's not chayiv. The Torah Tamim says it's a siyua to make it a more chashuv.
Why the ladies potter? Why would the ladies be potter?
No, ladies tam. It's a mitzvah to say shazam grandma. Ladies tam is a potter.
No, but the midin taduru of the husband. Why is that?
Right. So that's not a chiyuv. You can't say it's a chiyuv. If a best is my mitzvah, it's a reason why if I don't do it, you could say I'm mitzdayer. Okay, but it certainly doesn't make it that I'm chayiv only with my wife. That's bar. Rama never said that you're only chayiv with your wife.
Why isn't Tadura mechayiv as opposed to being just a ptur? That's the question.
Because it's bar. You see from the Etzim Zach that a woman is potter from the fact that it's mitzvah say she has my grandma. So there's no other extra pasuk that says she's chayiv. So the Taduru can't positively require me. Let's say a person's a bachelor. He certainly doesn't have it. So the Torah never was machadish that a person who's married, so then his tadur has to be like this. HaRav, his tadur is not with his svarim shrink, and his tadur is not with his table, and his tadur is not with a lot of his zachin. So all that stuff enhances the tadur. His tadur is not with his couch. Avada, the more he can enhance his sukkah, a wife is a couch in these halachas. If he's, every night he sits on a couch and it makes him comfortable and geschmack and that, so you should bring your couch into the sukkah. But no one's going to say if he doesn't bring his couch into the sukkah that he's not yet to the mitzvah sukkah. Now, the Maisa, that's...
the Mordechai, one more thing. The Mordechai Lechar says that, right? Why do I have to build something which it doesn't run into a tour of Teshu? What's the Mordechai telling me? Mordechai is telling me maybe you have to build a sukkah, which is such a private sukkah, such a beautiful sukkah, the wife has to sleep there, but then you're to do.
The Mordechai is saying, if you build it in a way that you can't possibly sleep in the sukkah, technically, because ganavim, because of cold, so then it doesn't have a shame of a sukkah. But if, so now, that you have to done. If I can't sleep without my wife, I can't sleep in a room without my wife, it's not possible. Which the whole thing is a bit rare and interesting. But let's say a person says, I can't possibly sleep. So then you'd have to don the Mordechai. And nobody was ever saying that. No one was saying that I can't possibly sleep in a room without my wife. It's impossible. They were saying it enhances the mitzvah and it makes it more to do. But if he's going to get up and say, I can't possibly sleep without my wife. So then Imkain, so now you have the problem of the Mordechai now. And that will say that maybe if it's a Zav Mitzias, that it's impossible to build a sukkah in a way where you can sleep with your wife. So maybe you're potter. meaning you're pater from building that type of sukkah. This is the mitzvah of sukkah in this life, and that's how you answer the Mordechai Stamazon.
Okay.
Give me 1 second, everybody. I have a problem in my throat. I just have to get a drink. Sorry, myself. Somebody here?
Everybody heard the Rav said that the wife is a couch. Everybody heard that? Let's not quote that.
Sorry, everybody said. Sorry, everybody said. The Maisa, for a bacher, it doesn't seem to be for a bacher. There's a limit. And B'emes the Nemukei Rachaim, the Mooncatcher, he says even if his father tells him not to sleep in a sukkah, he tells him explicitly he's not allowed to sleep in a sukkah. He tells him he's not allowed to listen to his father. As I the Mooncatcher, and he writes actually some very choice words about this. Right? For Steitzach, like I said, if it's freezing, etc., that's how you build a sukkah. The truth is, Rabbi Yisai, we can clear. Look at the sukkah on the upper right. Here, look at the sukkah. Look at the sukkah on the upper right. Sukkah like that, right? So you should know, Rabbi Yisai, Azaz sukkah, who says anyone ever has a right today to say, I'm pater from the sukkah? All right, with enough money, you can build something that looks like a house. So where b'chlal does anybody even have a havamina of saying today? Maybe you can say Krakow, I don't know. But where does a person have a havamina today? So maybe you should be mechuyev to go and build a house-like structure where it's mamashi has air conditioning there and heaters in there, etc. Ashrei misha zoich likach. So I saw an interesting thing. I saw in the Prima Godim that I'm sorry, I just have a cold. I saw it. Excuse me.
Okay, we got the picture, Pesach.
I saw in the Prima Godim that the Prima Godim said something very interesting. He says that l'choira, this also might go into Teshuvah. I'm throwing this in as an extra. It's a very interesting thing. This also might go into Teshuvah King Taduru. For money, so okay, for sure he's not going to be mechuyev to spend more than 20%. But let's say it's 19% of his income. He has $100,000 saved in the bank, and it'll cost him $19,000 to build the sukkah in a way where it's impossible to have any tsar. So maybe you should be mechuyev to do that. So I saw the interesting Prima Godim, some interesting thing to think about when the Olam's learning the sugya. He says maybe the din of Teshuvah King Taduru says that I only have to build what I would build for 7 days. In other words, let's say, just to make it practical, let's say a person wouldn't have a house for 7 days. How much would he spend to have a house for 7 days? What's the most he would spend? In other words, let's say you told me that you can build a house for $19,000 and you're going to only need it for 7 days. I don't know too many people that are going to hotels for $19,000 for 7 days. And Hanami, if yeah, then yeah.
Oh, no. Try HaRav this sukkah, Hashem. Plenty of people who will get a far bigger bill than $19,000.
Saying Hanami, that guy better be sleeping in a sukkah. But let's say they would tell me that for 7 days you're not having a house. I'm sleeping in my car, Rabbi Tzai, and if my wife is good, I'll put her in the trunk. Aber nicht besser. Not that more than that. So that's the idea. So it could be I'm only going to be mechuyev to spend the amount of money to make my house, my sukkah, mitzvah proof to the amount that I would spend on a 7-day experience. Right? That's l'chayra. Again, I don't know if it means hotel, because it could be that the person is not spending on a house; he's spending on the concept of a luxury and whatever. But how much would a person, if he got he was evicted for 7 days and he had to figure out what to do? So the amount that he would spend, so maybe that's the amount that he would have to spend on a sukkah, which each person would have to now don, and he would have to be very careful not to scream to mitzvah pater min sukkah. Something very interesting to think about. Now, the Divrei Yatziv has a new possible limitzchos, because again, for a bacher, I don't know, limitzchos, for a married fellow, not looking great. The shalativ maybe for a person who's Shana Rishayna, could we pater him from everything, right? He's not allowed to learn. So maybe if we could pater him from also sukkah, a Shana Rishayna, what's the nima? Well, last week's parsha, right? So Divrei Yatziv says that it's a limitzchos based on a taz. The Taz in our Simin, the Taz says that one of the reasons why, one of the limudei schusim to not sleep in a sukkah is because since there's a mitzvah to be misameach ishtoi, since he has a mitzvah to be Mesameach his wife, again, I'm not in Shana Rishayna, I'm right now in the Taz. Since on Yom Tov Sukkah, the person has a mitzvah to be Mesameach his wife, and if he's going to sleep in the Sukkah, she's not going to be B'Simcha. I mean, some wives are going to be gone to B'Simcha, but his wife, Al Kapanim, is not going to be B'Simcha if he's not at home. So therefore, he's being Mavatal, the Smach, the mitzvah of V'Samachta B'Chagecha, of being Mesamech Ishtai. Okay, that has, most Achrayim argue on. Okay, most Achrayim argue on, meaning Klaimar, the Taz wants to say that therefore you're an oisik the mitzvah, patam in a mitzvah. Since I'm oisik in the mitzvah being Mesamech my wife, and not just buying her jewelry and whatever, but I want her to be happy. So I'm oisik the mitzvah, and I'm patam in a mitzvah because she's not going to be happy if I'm sleeping in the sukkah. Now, it's Kain. The Achrayim will argue on the Taz. And they say,
Rav, can we put the Taz up on page 52 because the Ilam will be clarified if they see it's on page 52. Everybody say an ice test. Also give you a chance to catch your throat.
Thank you so much.
Page 52, Rav Pesach. It's not coming. Okay, continue as your convenience.
So the Achrayim argue on the task because they say that it's not the pshat that I have to make my wife happy every single moment of Yom Tov and in every single which way, which makes her happy. There's specific gedarim. You have to buy her something. Everybody has to buy his wife maybe an outfit, maybe jewelry, whatever. But it's not the pshat that he has to go out of his way and make sure there's no atzvis, akopanim, avad, it's the right thing. But it's not the kiyum of the mitzvah v'samachta that he could say, I'm oisik, the mitzvah, and I'm patam in a mitzvah. But come to gain the Yatziv, this is a very interesting thing. He says that so even if the Yatziv is in Chelik Beis Siman Reish Ayin Daled, he says even if you want to argue and say that we argue on the Taz, but that's all by a regular married person. Mashain Kain, when it comes to Shana Rishayna, he has a bezundera mitzvah of being Mesameach his wife. So Bishlam, a regular person, he has the mitzvah of Mesamachta b'chagecha. It could be Mekayim with other things. So it doesn't have to be Mekayim by not sleeping in the sukkah. But Mashain Kain, a person that has a din of a Shana Rishayna, what we saw in last week's parsha, he's not allowed to go to war. He has to stay with her the whole entire year. And therefore, such a person, if he's going to be away, his wife won't be in a matzav of simcha. And therefore, I say, this, maybe the Kulei Ama Yesh Lahakal, says the Divrei Yatziv, the Kloisenberger. Now, this is not pashit. I don't know if it's not pashit or if it's very shver. First of all, when you learn the sugi of Shana Rishayna, where does it say anywhere that he's not allowed to leave his wife and go sleep somewhere else at night? He's going to see her during the day. He's going to see her. Not only that, especially if the sukkah is right next door. So maybe there's a place in Rishayim they talk about if he's allowed to travel. Even that, some Rishayim say it's only if he's traveling for a long period of time. All the Achrayim say if he's traveling for a mitzvah, he's allowed to leave his wife. He's allowed to leave his wife if he's traveling for a mitzvah. And I'll tell you another thing. I don't know how many people that they're not going to travel. If it would come up a tremendous business deal and for whatever reason his wife couldn't come. So therefore, it's a little bit schwer to be saimich on this. A little bit schwer. And yeah, I'll say another thing. Let's say he's in the sukkah right now. So right now he's being oisik in the mitzvah of sukkah. What gives him a right to, he's oisik in mitzvah, he's patam mitzvah. What gives him a right to go into the house? Okay, but that's already, Ishladin. Maybe Taka, if he's Makayim a mitzvah, Mavin Yavin, so then you can say he's oisik a mitzvah and then he could stay there throughout the night or something like that. Okay, but to say that on every night of Sukkot that he has a right because he has to be Mesameach as each and the Shana Rishayna, that's already a little bit mechudish. This is a little bit mechudish. So upon him, I would say that it's a ksasli mitzvahs and maybe a shasat or something, and maybe if you add all these reasons together, let's say it's a chas and kala. Certainly, if it's someone in Shana Rishayna and his wife just had a baby and she needs his help, well, he doesn't need to come on to that. He might have anyways the din of chayla. So this Rabbi Sai is Adkan sleeping at night in the sukkah, where basically what comes out is Bachrim don't have a p'tur. Married people in nice climates, not so pashit, they have a p'tur. depending on his matzav. I mean, you take a guy, Rabbi Yisai, who he travels for business the whole entire time, and he's always out of his house, and he's always away, and everything. And then to go and say that, no, he says, I can't sleep without my wife. It's going to ruin my mitzvah. I mean, you have a person that he commutes. He travels to do his job in America, and he lives in Eretz Yisrael, and he's 4 days a week. He's not with his wife, and he's there for Shabbos. And then to go and say that, I don't know, not so pashut. I always wondered in the bungalow, that was the hanhaga always, that the husband went for 4 or 5 days a week, and then he came back for Shabbos, and he's going to say that I can't sleep without my wife. I can't sleep in a room without my wife. I don't know. He does it for the 2 months before the sukkah season. So I don't know. The Maisa.
He understands as the wife expects at least yontiv, the husband should be home.
Yeah, I hear. I definitely hear it. I mean, I get, look, das is the Heilige Rama. The Misha Zoiche that he can build a sukkah just for him and his wife, a makam yuchedes, tavala bracha. In other words, if he needs the wife to be in the sukkah, so then tavala bracha. If he doesn't, so then avada is mekayim the mitzvah behiddur rav even without his wife. Okay, but upon him, that's legabe shana b'shayna. Maybe there's a little bit more of a mitzvahs, but that's upon him during the nighttime. When you get to the daytime, ironically, it's much more schwer. You get to the daytime, a person wants to take a nap in the daytime. Now, it's kemat, there's no heter. Now again, if he's in a sukkah and there's mosquitoes or it's boiling hot. A minute ago he said it's freezing cold, by the way, but okay. But anyways, if it's boiling hot, and I don't know, halavai, if he's he can bring in an air conditioning, or let's say loimavai, if there's people in the sukkah, so they can't sleep, they're making noise, or it's not embarrassing to sleep in front of people. Okay, mitzdayer, when to apply mitzdayer. Like I said before, a person has to be careful to not just say a mitzdayer. I don't know how fast he's closing his store, if it's boiling hot in his store. I don't know how fast he's, v'chulei. But if he has the p'tur mitzdayer during the day, loimavai. Let's say, stam, he wants to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon. HaRav, everyone's on a cholamoy trip. I don't know any heter in the world not to sleep in the sukkah. Not a bocher, not a married person, not shana rishayna, not shana shniya, not shana chamishis. I don't know any heter in the world. In such a case, people don't take naps in the middle of the day without their wife. What shaykhis? Maybe at night you could say there's such a thing. And shana rishayna, he wants to go to the sukkah, is to let his wife come with him. Gesund hate. What's the problem?
What about the heter? What about the heter of having to schlep? Many sukkahs are merpesets, they're small. There's no room for a bed, so you have to schlep the table out and replace it for a bed. Is an older person?
It can't be, because that's the etz and surah of the mitzvah. It's impossible that someone's going to pater himself. You know what it's doima to? It's doima to the Trumas Hadashin. Trumas Hadashin Timatari Bey says that a sukkah, which is zayin al zayin, is quite an uncomfortable place. Rabbi says zayin al zayin. That's pashit 70 centimeters, Rabbi Yisai. It's about 2 feet by 2 feet. How's in the world he's supposed to sleep in the sukkah? And says the Trumas Hadashin, of course, says Mefurish, that's kosher for sukkah. So what do? You cover it up, you put your feet outside, and make sure nobody's going to trip, and your feet don't have to be in the sukkah, I guess. What do you mean? It's clearly uncomfortable. But there, your uncomfort comes from the chefsa of the mitzvah. You can't, let's say a person comes and says, you know what? I just can't sleep outside. I can't. I need to sleep in a roofed place. Adoni, you are saying I don't agree with the Heilige Bashef's mitzvah of sukkah. The Rebbeinu Shalom said you got to go outside. In essence, Rabbi Yisai, there is no question that the mitzvah of sukkah is going to be less comfort than your house. Of course, you try to do whatever you can to make it comfortable, but if it's less comfort, that is exactly what it is. That's why the Torah said that the Heilige Bashefer told us that the mitzvah of sukkah is not in Pesach time, it's in Sukkah's time, which is a little bit less comfortable. So it should be more nicker. The mitzvah, there's no question that you're going to be a little bit less comfortable. The fact that he's going to have to schlep out his bed and whatnot, okay, that's what it requires. It requires him to do a little bit of an effort. Now, it's true, the place can discuss. Sometimes there was mamash schlepping for a ganze schlepperai, and maybe there is a market for such a p'tur, which is very fair to understand, because that's lefum tzara agra. The din of mitzdayer is when there's something in the sukkah which is staring you, not the sukkah mitzias itself, and not the building the sukkah. I'll say mitzdayer, put them in a sukkah. It's too difficult for me to build a sukkah. No, that we say lefum tzara agra. You'll get schar for being matriach in the mitzvah. But if a person comes and says, It's hard for me. I have to walk up and down all the stairs. That's a pasha to say mitzvah pater min sukkah in that case. If I care when he'll be in the sukkah, I'll be b'simcha rabba, right? So that's why it's a garnish pasha, and during the daytime, I don't know from a heter. Ad kedei kach, come to gain the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai is in Parshas Azinu. He talks about, every Maggid Shir's biggest fear is a shear during Sukkot. So now you're giving a shear, and I always tell people, a person falls asleep during the shear. The first 10 minutes, that's your fault if you fall asleep. If you fell asleep in the first 10 minutes of the shear, that's definitely not my fault. Afterwards, you can blame me. No, so that everyone's afraid. You go to a shear. A shear is a school to fall asleep for some people. Not only that, the school to snore for some people. So Mamela, what's the din? You see somebody in the middle of Kriyas HaTorah, or you see somebody in the middle of a shear on Sukkot, and he falls asleep, as during the daytime. Comes again the Ben Ish Chai, and he says, you have to wake him up. You have a chiyuv of arbes, and Mamela, you got to wake him up. So I guess at night, we have libudei schusim. So you don't have to wake him up if you see him sleeping at night. But if you see him in the day, the Luach Eretz Yisrael, to Kaczynski, they bring that on a Shana Rabbah, there's a minig in Eretz Yisrael that a lot of people stay up the whole night and learn. And he says against this minig, he says, what are you gaining? First of all, in the morning, you won't be able to daven. Okay, no. And the Shavuos is not much different. But he says also, you're going to fall asleep. So a lot of people have the minig in Eretz Yisrael, they do it in the sukkah. But you see that they were concerned about dozing off. And it seems to be an incredible thing that the Ben Ish Chai seems to say, that you have to wake somebody up if you see him outside the sukkah sleeping. Now this, Rabbi Yisai, I saw a few reasons why that the Paiskim are makel, but they're all not pashit. They're all not pashit. In other words, I saw one sefer, he says that, well, if you see everyone falls asleep outside the sukkah or at a shear, so then maybe that's ke'ein taduru. Maybe you could say it's ke'ein taduru for a person to fall asleep. Lav davka, every time I sleep in my house. HaRav, you see people sleeping in a shear. So maybe you'll say that's ke'ein taduru. One svara. Then I saw another svara that it's not pashit, that maybe the ganze isser is to go to sleep. But maybe if you are asleep, so then maybe there's no isser to be asleep outside of sukkah. There's an isser to go to sleep. Now this gets involved in the famous shaila, is a person when he's a yashan, could he be Makayim mitzvahs, right? We like to say that, a person when he's sleeping, he goes from like a gaver to a chefza. So maybe he can't be Makayim mitzvahs when he's sleeping. And so maybe you'll say that by the sukkah, it's the same thing. So it's true, you're not allowed to go to sleep. And this was famous that there were certain yeshivas, that there were shiva paskins, you could carry the guy out when he's sleeping. Because while he's in the sukkah, he's not being Makayim the mitzvah. So that's another time that they want to say. So therefore I don't have to wake him up because right now he's not getting any avera. Another time that they want to say is, I must tell you, on that taina, not so pashut. I mean, it's hard to believe that the mitzvah of sukkah is not to be sleeping in the sukkah. There's a famous goyin. The goyin says that shema mitzvah leyeda davarad. If you sleep in sukkah, you can sleep yechidi. Why? Because you're getting a mitzvah. What do you mean I'm getting a mitzvah? I'm asleep. I'm not getting any mitzvah. Elma, you are getting a mitzvah. It's a little bit hard to understand that the person doesn't have a mitzvah while he's sleeping in the sukkah. That's the ganz tzura of the mitzvah. And maybe we'll come back to this. But the first taina, what was the first taina? The first taina was that if you see someone sleeping out of the sukkah, don't wake him. Why? The Ben Ish Chai says wake him. He says don't wake him. Why? Because that's a normal thing. That's stage came to do. People, when they fall asleep outside the sukkah, outside at a shear, so then nobody he falls asleep on the couch and you tell him, let's get him to his bed or something like that. It's a normal thing for a person to fall asleep on the couch. It sounds like a nice svara, but it seems to be that the Gemara is mefurish not like this. And if you look in the Sfas Emes, he seems to have this time. The Sfas Emes in the Gemara and Daf Chav Vav, over there, the Gemara says, what's the chilik that by eating, even an achilas arai, an achilas arai, you're allowed to do outside the sukkah. Ma shein came when it comes to sleeping, a sheinas arai can't be outside the sukkah. So Gemara asks, what's the difference? So the Gemara says that the sleeping, we're afraid that it might linger, it might get carried away. Shema Yiradim. He might get schlepped up, and he might fall asleep for longer, and it'll be a keva. First teretz. Then the Gemara says another teretz, ain't keva l'sheina. It's enough. All he needs is to rejuvenate. He just needs a little bit. He just needs a little bit to rejuvenate. In fact, this SMS, why does the Gemara say a pasha reason? I'll tell you why sleeping outside the sukkah is aser. I'll tell you why. Pasha. Eating outside the sukkah, it's normal to have a snack outside the sukkah. But to sleep outside, it's not normal for a person to not sleep in his house. And therefore, he always sleeps in his house. And therefore, that's why you have to always sleep in the sukkah. So the SMS, the Gemara did not say that. Why didn't the Gemara say that? Semuz Zayin, that's not enough of a chilik. Kanira, the Gemara understood that no, a person will fall asleep outside his house. And that is normal. And Afal Pikain, that's not enough of a reason to pater him. That's not enough of a reason to pater him. The Gemara doesn't say that's a chilik. It sounds like the Gemara knew that he does fall asleep outside the house for a little bit. And Afal Pikain, he still has to always go in the sukkah. Why? Zok the Gemara. Because it might be b'kvias, he might fall asleep for a long time, or because all you need is to rejuvenate. And therefore, that kvias we want in the sukkah. So maybe that's all you need, that keva. So therefore, it's very fair to say that the reason you don't have to wake this guy up is because since he's outside the sukkah, it's a normal thing sleep outside the sukkah. No way, then the Gemara should have said that. So this Rabbi Isai, if that's the case, so now I would say like this, to go and wake somebody up, no, all right, I'm not holding there by waking somebody up. They say that one time Rav Chanan asked the Chafetz Chaim that they found that the Levana was outside, and it was after a long time of not waiting for the Levana, and Rav Chanan came in and asked the Chafetz Chaim, should he wake up the Shiva, Rav Landinsky, right, for the Kiddush Levana, and they say, Rav Chanan said, Rav Chanan writes that the Chafetz Chaim looked at him like at the Meshiga gegangen, like asking to wake up a Yid. Now, obviously, he was doing it for a mitzvah in Kish Levana, and probably, but the message was clear, to wake up a Yid, So, I'm not holding by waking somebody up for the Ben Ish Chai, because you could argue on the Ben Ish Chai, and you could say one of these two tzadim, but me, myself, I'm certainly not going to be saimach on this to fall asleep outside of a sukkah. And say, well, it's a normal thing to fall asleep in the shir, whatnot. Now, maybe if he's on the road, and he's driving, he's on a bus or something like that. So that he might have anyways a p'tur of drach and put them in a sukkah. So if a person falls asleep on a bus or in a car ride, etc., so there you could say maybe he's drachim, even though Rav Moshe has chumras when it comes to drachim. He said the only time it's drachim is if you're going for a mitzvah or something like that. Okay, ish ladim. But if I say vait to go to say that if he's falling asleep in a car ride, no, maybe there we could be meko and say he's drachim. But to fall asleep outside of the shir, to fall asleep at a shir, that already says garnish pashit, and to call a person a shaita, I don't know. What was the whole gzeira? What was the gzeira? The gzeira was, don't go to sleep for a second, because you might fall into a slumber. So then it seems to be the isser is the slumber. So it seems to be there is an isser of sleeping outside of sukkah. So how could you say that the isser is just going to sleep? It doesn't sound like that in the Gemara. The Gemara sounds like the isser is the shema yiradim. It's falling into a deep sleep. So what's the problem with a deep sleep? The problem is pashut. You'll be sleeping outside of a sukkah. So it's a little bit hard to say that, Sad. And the pashtus is, I think that is definitely the pashtus, is that even if you want to say on other mitzvahs, maybe a sleeping person can't be makayim mitzvahs while he sleeps. Well, some people wear tzitzis when they sleep because that's maybe a shmira and whatnot. It is also not mechuyev to. But when it comes to sukkah, it does seem to be that the ikar b'hachi chai v'rachmana, the ikar tzura of the mitzvah, it does seem to be is sleeping there. Therefore, it's not going to be enough to say that if he didn't go to sleep, then it's okay. It's very schwer. Pashtus is the mitzvah to sleep in the sukkah. That's the pashtus. I saw Grata. I think it was in.
You discussed that. You mentioned that.
I think I saw in maybe the Avnei Nezer. I think I saw somewhere that somebody said that you don't have to say Kriya Shema Lamita in the sukkah because it's a shmira from the mazikin. So therefore, you only have to say the Shema and the Amatul. But Akapanim, Alocha L'Maisa Abaisai, let's make a little bit of a sikum over here. One thing is clear, is that there's a chiyuv gomer to sleep in the sukkah. It's countless mishnayos, gemaras that all shtelevek alocha dafka there, and the fakert it's even more of a chiyuv, and there's no heter of a rai, and that's why our gemara doesn't say it with a rai. There's clearly a chiyuv to sleep in the sukkah. Are there limudei schlusim, that there are people that don't sleep in the sukkah? So for a person that's cold, freezing, he might have mitzvah. If he can't sleep because of the noise, because of the mosquitoes, he might have mitzvah. It's not to touch it to claim mitzvah, especially if you built the sukkah in a way where you can't possibly sleep in the sukkah. That's garnish pashit. The Rama was melamed schus mitzad. A person wants to sleep in the sukkah with his wife. Ashrei me that could make a sukkah together with his wife and have a separate sukkah. If not, there is a limit schos. Shan Rishayna, there's another limit schos of the Divrei Yatziv, which was also very difficult because it doesn't seem to be that there's a chiyuv of being with her the entire time in Shan Rishayna. Maybe somebody should tell this to the guys from Shan Rishayna. And when it comes to the daytime, that's even more schwer. Bachrim certainly don't have a heter at night, unless there's mitzvah. But Bachrim, but during the daytime, even a married person doesn't seem to have heter unless he's mitzvah. And if the person would fall asleep outside the sukkah, at a shear, etc., some stomach, you don't have to wake him up. You can be saimach on those svaras, but a person himself shouldn't be saimach on those svaras unless he's on a bus ride, a car ride, and then he can be pater, mikayach holchei drachim, pater min HaSukkah.